So the three broad themes that we would like to explore today are more or less on the lines of what impact digital will have on the HR space. The question of personalization, is it more of a hype? Is it largely overhyped in the industry today? Or is there actually some substantial reality associated to it? The third theme that we'd want to talk about is on the lines of what digital has in store for HR professionals. How are organizations going to have to equip themselves to drive this change? What roles and responsibilities are going to come up in efforts to drive this change? So without further ado, I'd like to kick this discussion off by asking Sonali what impact we've seen over the last 5 years when it comes to digital being infused in the HR industry.
Sure, thank you. If you look at, if this conversation was happening 2 years ago, you would have seen that most HR organizations, if you went back and looked at the infrastructure, that would have been at least around 5 or 7 years away from a refresh. So between 2015 and 2017, if I look at data today, you will see most organizations in their HR departments, they have either changed the technology or are in the midst of changing the technology. And the question is, why is that? Now, the world has become digital, and with the world becoming digital, the new currency is data. So as an employee today, I will look forward to talking to the HR department and saying, I will no longer go back and say, can you tell me this data? I would like to be able to get on to a device, either on, at my desk or preferably mobile, and say, I would like to know information. So it's become information anywhere, any location, any point in time, completely, platform agnostic. And at the same time, we're saying with data, because data is no longer in hard form that you have to go back and look at, you have the entire field of analytics coming in, saying there's so much of data out there which HR teams have. So with that data, what's the analytics? And this analytics is not just about stuff that happened yesterday. It's about predictive analytics. So how do you give that intelligence to the organization to say what is going to happen tomorrow from the data that's there today? Another additional thing, I won't say new, is the millennial piece. So the way millennials behave today, or are more, I should say, more hardwired, they would like immediate data. So for example, you go back and say, if they go back and ask a question at a consumer site, they would like information in 10 minutes. So that's, and remember, our employee workforce today, it's going to soon become primarily millennials. So all this has led to changes in the way the digital world is, and therefore how HR has had to transform.
I'd like to add to what Sonali said. HR itself started off, when I started my career, it was all about timesheets and time offices. I know many of you may not have been around at that time when I see some young faces here. We have come to a space where people don't want to be monitored, right? Organizations are saying, hey, work from anywhere. It's remote offices, because technology has moved forward so much. HR, the impact that Sachin was talking about, we no longer are going to be called HR. We have to tune ourselves to say, how digital are we, right? To that extent, I think the word millennials itself is passé. People are calling either digital natives, people who've been born when digital revolution happened, and some of us are here are actually digital immigrants. It means we have learned the technology along the way, right? So if we are all immigrants and we are catering to people who are digital natives, like for instance, my daughter is only comfortable with her iPad, right? She's not comfortable with her pencil and notebook anymore. So the fundamental change I see for HR is that how are you becoming smart creatives rather than going by your what you learned in business school? How do you become smart creatives and how you're able to address your employee needs? So that's the fundamental shift I'm seeing from an HR perspective.
Just to add on, very interesting points. 3-4 drivers which is leading to the pressure on organization and on HR to to drive digital transformation. Some of them have been said that earlier Krishna Kumar said that you could work from a Starbucks. So the boundaries between work and life are blurring very fast. That's one driver I see. Second one is, I think some of you attended the Digital Desh workshop earlier, panel discussion. Very interesting. India is a mobile first, computer second country. And the experience of social mobile analytics cloud, which you call as MAC, is real for a tier 3 city or a tier 3 employee or an organization, a person who's in that part of the world. So if today I am able to kind of log into my mobile to Zomato and order food or decide on a restaurant, the experience or expectation from an employee in the organization is to have that kind of experience for them to probably finalize their training program. What is most relevant for them? Can they just log in and decide as to, so with the same ease, decide on a training program? The third thing which I see as a change, which is or a driver which is happening in this space, is around the famously known phrase, the tyranny of choices. If you walk into a supermarket and look for a paste, there are hundreds of pastes available. So you do not know which to choose from. If you actually are traveling to an unknown city, if you are on an expedition and you want to go to an unknown city, log into a Make My Trip or an Expedia, it throws up 200 hotels. So how do I know what's best for me and what's the most relevant for me? So to help employees navigate through this tyranny of choice, which thoroughly demotivates them, you need to bring them to a place where it is very easy for them. Some question was asked about talent acquisition a little while ago, which talked about how is technology going to change? Thousands of resumes, and how do I narrow down to what I need and what's most relevant? Campus interviews at the point of time happening in multiple campuses across the country are competing for talent. You are a day one company in multiple places. With 3 resources in campus hiring who manages this, how do you scale this? So this is the third driver, which in my mind is driving this. We also talked about the advent of millennials in the organization and their need for anytime, anywhere as an important driver for this. And the last but not least, this is primarily for employees. But when it comes to HR, what's the primary driver for HR folks like us is the fact that there's so much of development happening in the technology space. So if IBM Watson can see or collect information from all over the globe available to fine-tune diagnostics of a patient, can I transfer that into an organization where I could predict my talent behavior or an engagement maturity stage using such a tool? So these are some of the changes which probably are, to me, driving. I think there's a group of folks, which is a combination of HR folks and R&D folks. I say this more to the R&D folks to think through and help us with these challenges we face, to help us navigate and digitize the HR organization faster and better. So we are short of a mic, so I'll pass it on to Maitreyee.
So Maitreyee, before we move on, I just wanted to break this down a little further. So let's look at it from a sub-function perspective. So it has been covered how, in a way, in the previous panel, one question was addressed as to how talent acquisition is going to be impacted. But what about the other functions? What about, say, performance management and talent development? How are these going to be impacted by digital technologies being infused in the HR space? How exactly, what kind of change are we going to see as a result of it?
So I can start off, and
Sure.
what I think is we're already in that wave where we've come a long way ahead, where we are saying, though we're already trying to catch up always, like we were talking over lunch, the technology is already ahead and HR is always trying to catch up. But I think we've really come a long way in terms of technology. And I think I'd like to sort of give an example at this point to say, in my own organization, I work with Saba, and we are a talent suite company. The interesting part about my job is that I'm also an internal customer because it's a talent suite. So I'm a customer as well as a enabler function. And one of the interesting things that we did, and related to the point earlier that Sonali made, especially about predictive analytics that people are looking for. So employees are looking for that now. They're no more interested in going and saying, share me this data and give me this, this data for me and my team. They're interested in analytics. So what we have is we've developed a very interesting component called PQ, which is people quotient. And essentially this is based on DNA, which is network analytics, basically. And what it does is it measures the score of every person in the company based on what the person is contributing in the company. So in a community and an ecosystem of employees, customers, clients, and so on, an employee may be sharing something in terms of, somebody asks a question, that employee may be sharing an answer. That answer may be supplemented by 5 other people. Somebody else might contribute an article, and 10 other people might share that article ahead. So what has happened in all this is that in the entire ecosystem, there are several people who've got a lot more knowledge and a lot more answers to a particular question that they either have or they might have. So we use this PQ score to not only, as a platform for people to share knowledge, but also to show how engaged they are, how they're connected to the overall ecosystem. And then this gets tied up into a lot of other things like, as an HR, let's say I'm doing a succession planning exercise. And I say, this is the type of characteristics I'm looking for in a particular person. The PQ score will actually help me to show, throw up profiles within the company that could match a particular career progression that I'm looking for. So a lot of it is sort of tied down, and all of it comes through technology and analytics. So we're using it, and we're trying to see how, to make better sense of it. We're not there yet. The tool is fantastic, and but we're still trying to see how, more number of ways in which we can use this particular data and particular analytics to impact many more of the HR functions. So today we may be doing it only for succession, or for training, or for recruiting, but we want to see how it impacts a lot more of the HR functions.
In fact, I'd like to just add on to what Maitreyee said. Imagine a world where you have all your employee information on a particular system. You have your payroll data in another system. So today, if you look at most organizations, HR is in one platform, one tool, finance is in another tool, and sales data in terms of how people have been selling, quotas, etc., is another tool. Now imagine a world where a manager, and this is any manager in the organization, is able to take data from the HR part of the tool and say, here's this individual who has been doing so well, this is the career progression, rating, etc. This is how his engagement scores in the organization have been, because when people leave the organization, this is the exit interview feedback that's been coming in, so you get to know what are the issues in that organization. You also go back and look at the succession planning and say, this is how the individual can grow. These are what are the possible, career choices the person is interested in. Look at what's available, and then tie it back, if the person is a salesperson, to say, how well has the person been doing? If margins are critical in your organization, what kind of a margin percentage has this individual and his or her team sold? So it's all data that's available there. And what we're talking of is basically a layer on the top, an application layer, which is completely platform or tool or infrastructure agnostic, to be able to pick all that data and provide that data not in the hands of the HR, but in the hands of the manager. That's what I like to add.
So one thing that I can add, going back to what Sachin was talking about, personalization, right? The theme of, whether it is manager or HR, we're talking of employee experience. Now, just like marketers are talking about consumers, right? HR, we are also getting an organization what is called as consumerization. And I liked an interesting topic that you were talking about, where people like and then share, which is called as the helpification, right? Where you're liking, you're sharing, and I can give you one example from what Pega does. We have a very powerful sales automation application that we help our customers with. This is absolute personalization. What it does is, and it relates to performance of individuals, right? It ties two things: one, sales for the organization, and two, how does it help performance for the individual. So what essentially it does is, using AI, helps the salesperson on the field give real-time information on what is the best deal that will work for them, right, based on data that is available, tons of data, similar data that's available, and kind of telling them, helping them how to make a deal successful. This to me is real personalization, right? It is real, it is no longer a myth. It is something that is really happening. From our own company perspective, we are making this transition, which you would have heard everybody doing performance management transition, no ratings, it's cool, right? Managers don't have to have those tough conversations. Yes, we are in the journey of making that change, but what you will see is that it's a very simple tool where people get in, and all of us like Facebooks. So as soon as you log into the tool, we'll very soon have it on mobile. All that you have to do is ask your manager for a touch point, right? And you log in and say, this is how I feel today. There are smiley faces, there are sad faces. So all that we are talking about is I go and click, say, hey, I'm feeling really happy, or I say, I'm really not happy today. That goes to your manager, and there are a couple of simple questions that the employee can write in saying, this is why I'm struggling with my project or whatever, goes to the manager, and then it enables, right? This is real personalization. Taking a step further, what we could do is what other organizations like IBM do, which is Social Pulse. They do sentiment analysis, right? And it's a big thing, which we do in product, and people say, how do I product position mine? We can easily do some of these things, right? So your huge employee engagement surveys for HR becomes passe. You don't have to do those annual surveys, action plans, etc., etc. You can just look at these smiley faces and say, okay, I have 80% of my organization which shows smiley faces, right? That's really the cool transition that we are making from, at least from Pega's perspective, I can say from my experience.
If we could just add on, to me, if we step back and look at what's personalization. Personalization to me is truly empowering a person to do what he wants to do or what he chooses to do. So, and the discussion here is more around how technology is going to help you do that. So, we discussed earlier about the plethora of, particularly with MOOCs, etc., coming, plethora of offerings of learning available to a person. So, how does he or she narrow down to what he or she wants to do? Can there be situations where he can just use a natural language conversation with a chatbot and get this input as to what is best for him? Probably the same people of the same profile who have done the program, the feedback on the program, people with similar career aspiration, these all pulled in, with Sonali talked and Maitreyee talked about data being pulled in the back end and provide an insightful outcome to the individual, saying that maybe this is what you should look at or she should look at. So I think that to me is the level of personalization today, particularly is happening in the space of HR where companies are helping build. The second, I'm going to talk about something completely different set of personalization, which is may not look in the face as a personalization, but it's also about choice and empowerment. I heard one of our earlier speakers talk about learning givers and learning seekers. So how do organizations build a culture or a tool system which will help make those choices? I like Facebook because I can choose whom I am connected with. I can drop the person who I do not want to. I can pick the person who I want to connect with. So social platforms like a Yammer or a workplace in the organization are available today. So, but do we leverage it to the extent where we want to do it? So I have seen examples where companies have actually pulled together a social platform of a group of talent or a group of knowledge people who are willing to give and take, and create those communities which can substantially enhance the value for the organization. So that is another form of personalization and empowerment provided to employees. To a stretch of that is something which I have seen in a company right here in the city. We all love beer, so it's not late in the evening yet. But so the beer which we drink tastes in a certain form every time. We buy Kingfisher Premium, and it tastes mostly the same, isn't it? Every time. So that's because it is brewed by brewmasters. So brewmasters are skilled people who have a huge level of tacit knowledge, and once they go out of, say, United Breweries, so how do you retain the tacit knowledge? So today organizations are engaging through these social platforms which are internally secure, but given exposure to brewmasters externally. So they can continuously talk to the internal brewmasters and external brewmasters so that the tacit knowledge is not lost to the company. Somebody in the earlier forum talked about domain knowledge being retained in the organization. So these are some of the simple ways in which you can leverage what's available. You don't have to really think that it's really outside and you need to get it, but it's available with you, and create as HR people the construct and the models where we can leverage these kind of opportunities for enhancing value for the organization. So, and the third level of personalization is an HR person. So I am doing a talent review. So today, technology, I go back to the IBM Watson case. I happened to have a chat with the global HR head of IBM Watson. He showed me something very interesting. He showed me a psychographic profile of a psychographic profile of a leader. So, and the source of that psychographic profile is actually last 20 emails he has written. See, the supercomputer has kind of scanned it and kind of came up with a psychographic profile based on the intelligence which created out of it. So it might not be a perfect way, but with machine learning, you will see an HR person having that additional resources of getting to go there to have that personal insight into something which you need to take a decision or add value to a leader in that discussion or a developmental discussion. So these are some of the places where I see these technologies are coming and become really create transformational value for business leaders and HR folks in the organization.
So before we move on, I just wanted to address the elephant in the room. How do you make sense of all the technology out there? So there's so much noise, and how do you see through all of that and manage to find the signal? So how do you find the most effective technology solutions that can be adapted to your HR practice, or the internal teams that you have in place?
So I think gone are the days when we used to say any successful HR technology is how well you do change management, right? You decide you want to do this change, and then you say, okay, great, you've done it. Everybody is learning it. We will get there, etc., etc. Sounds familiar? That's what we want to do. Now, any technology that you adopt is successful based on the adoption rate. So if you've rolled something out from a technology perspective, or for that matter, any program, you look at your adoption rate amongst employees. And if you see that it is quick, then you move forward with it. Otherwise, just follow your ego, go back to the drawing board. I think that's a beautiful filter to say, what do you make out of all the technology? It is great. You want this, you want that. Hey, that company is doing this. I'll take this, etc. I think you really need to sit down and say, what's the best thing? Roll it out and be happy to roll it back if you think it's not getting adopted in your organization.
So I think Shanthi made a very great, valid comment in terms of adoption. So there is a lot of data out there. The question on which data would you go back and pick depends on a number of things. One is your organization's ability to absorb the data. So for example, at NetApp, I remember having a conversation with a group of leaders where, using a predictive tool, we were saying, hey, these are the next few folks who are going to leave. And that group of leaders was primarily engineers. So they came back asking me information in terms of, what's the algorithm behind it? How do you know? Do you know how does it work? And I said, hey, guys, I'm not doing the algorithm behind it. I don't know, but I know this tool is respected. This is what it's saying. So they had tons of questions. Lo and behold, a month later, amongst the 5 people that we had said had the highest chances of leaving, 2 of them left. Now they all woke up and said, okay, we completely trust your system. Can you tell us more, and can we go back and look at it? So it's about the adoption, and there is so much. There is no way you're going to go back and try and make a change in all of them. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. So like the way people say you want bite-sized learning, an organization's ability to accept change also has to be bite sizes. And when you string it together, it may be a huge change. But rather than telling them we're going to do the whole 9 yards, start with, we're just doing this. They accept, adopt, and then you move on. I think that's one way that you'd be able to make sense of all the data out there and look at adoption. Maitreyee.
Yeah, I think I look at it from two perspectives. One is the HR perspective, and then the second is the employee perspective. So HR has moved. If you look at 15 years back versus today, uh, the two key things that moved for us as HR as a function is, one is we all have global teams now. 15 years back, we worked in pretty much companies that were in India, not so diverse in terms of. And second is metrics. So I don't remember a time 15 years back when anybody asked me for an HR metrics or, held me accountable. I was only accountable for, regular HR functions. Today, it's very different. Today, everybody holds me to a metrics. So the leadership holds me to metrics, the peer group holds me to metrics, every single employee holds me to metrics. So because these two things have changed, I think one is my own need. So which is, as an HR function, my own need to adopt the technology to make my life easier. So I have all the data, I make sense of it, so that for me it's easier to maintain stuff, analyze stuff, and see what my people are going through. Okay, as a function. And the second part is from the employee's perspective, where really, because we're dealing with millennials today, what is it that they want? So coming to her point, where what is it that they want? They want like 10 things related to technology. Like a survey is no longer impactful. Most companies today will do the smiley thing, or something like that, which is telling you on a daily basis, probably like on a minute by minute basis, how they're feeling. That's what people want. And I think that part is how much we really want to sort of get into what we want to do about it and make it sustainable and scalable, because that's also changing every day. So just being reactive and doing 10 other things just because everybody else wants to do it is tough decisions. But making sure that whatever we are doing is going to sort of hold on for the next couple of months or maybe a year at least in today's scenario is something that that adoption, or we look at it from that point of view. So these are the two perspectives.
So very interesting question, Sachin. Actually, it makes you step back and think, because so the paradox is that there is this big demand in people to have the same cool experience, Uber-like experience, as what I call, in their day-to-day transactions in the organization. But the organization doesn't have that investment in the organization. So there's a big gap in that expectation and experience. So why is it so? So if you were to step back and look at it, is the fact that if you look at any of these cool applications which you have today, have a revenue model behind it. So there's a revenue model as to why it is sustainable. Whereas it's a kind of a failure in the HR leadership today to have convinced the business the value of what it brings in and create a revenue value around that. And that's a big gap. So we can't adopt. So there is limited budget, so we can't adopt all these things. To me, the second point is around the systems which are available. So one of the big challenges, if you look at it as an HR person, one of the challenges I face is that your database system, which is like sometimes like an elephant, large systems, they can't dance. So you really need to have surround applications around it, which are created by a lot of smart people sitting in this room, which will kind of enable us to connect to the base database and talk to each other. So can we help build some of them? And the challenge is that they don't talk to each other. So we have a fantastic recognition portal in the organization in Schneider, but does it talk to the one voice engagement survey tool on how, and do they create a correlation? May not be, but that is probably the next level of evolution, as where Sonali earlier talked about a single platform sitting above and drawing it all together. So that's one space. So how do you really navigate through this? And there are HR folks in the room. My advice to them is to sometimes, so some of the things in life are much more simple than what you think. So one of my aha moment yesterday or day before yesterday, when some of us were sitting in an HRT meeting, and somebody from the analytics team came and made a presentation on the utilization of the trends within our recognition tool, which he launched about 8 months back in Schneider. So fascinating insights and awareness. We did not buy anything new. We have Outlook. It has got a Power BI built into it. We just use that. So my request and encouragement to the young HR folks is to really constantly not look out only, but look within. There are enough systems inside, and maybe that's a very great place to start with. And some of these systems, for example, the one I talked about, can be integrated with Cortana, and I can ask, which was the value to which in this particular business people have been recognized the most, and I just have to speak to it, and I'm able to get a pop-up report on my mobile. So that's the level of system which is already available. When you buy an MS Office, you probably get it along with that. So sometimes you don't always look out and probably take some ownership, look what is inside, and learn how to use it well. Would be my first step.
So I think we have enough time for just one more question. So I just wanted to address this as to what HR professionals need to equip themselves with, what skills, what roles will emerge in the future so as to drive the digital change that we're going to see in the industry.
So in this room, how many of you know Amy Ingram? Anybody? Who's that? Absolutely. So it is a virtual assistant that helps. Basically, you don't need your executive assistant anymore. Does scheduling of calendars, etc., etc. To the extent that the joke is that somebody actually called her out for date. So bots are becoming so human-like. So to my mind, the new age HR's challenge is going to be, how do you deal with bots and real human beings working alongside each other?
Okay. Would anyone like to?
Sure. So I think it's about like Shanthi was saying, right? You have these chatbots, you have various things which are basically taking over repetitive tasks which can be data mined on a regular basis. So from a skill development standpoint for HR professionals, it's about trying to understand what are some of the themes. So you should be having good analytical skills to be able to look at, make sense of a lot of disparate data and be able to put that together and say that this is the theme that is coming through. So good diagnostic skills, good analytical skills, I think are going to be the key, together with, of course, understanding the business, because then you can go back and say, I have my business skills, I have my analytical skills, the HR skills, and how am I combining them to give me something very different, which you would never get if you just looked at those individual silos. So that's what I would say.
Just to add on, to me, HR systems can be bought, applications can be installed. But what we need in HR is a mindset. So what we do in our company as a practice is that we are an engineering company moving fast into digital. And if HR needs to drive the digital transformation of the company, we want HR people to have strong digital mindset. So digital has become a competency or a parameter on which we assess leaders and HR. So it has become a part of the people review conversations. So if you really want to grow in the organization, you have various layers of digital capability. You are questioned, you are challenged on your capability in constantly building your digital capability, becoming a base requirement. So I think that's the way to go, and that's important. And without HR having a mindset of digital, the ability to drive a culture of digital becomes much more challenging for a company like ours. So this is where I would say.
I think you guys have covered it all. I think that the line between HR and the rest of the folks in the company is becoming very thin. Earlier it was HR were very non-technical people and we had engineers on one side. Today, my entire HR team understands technology, I think, much more than I do. They tell me the latest stuff that's going on, and which is really cool because then they go ahead and do a lot of stuff. So yeah, I agree with all of them. Flexibility and open mind, I think, very, very important, because if you tend to stay in something which has worked for you so far, and you say, okay, this is working, so let it be this way, is not what's going to work anymore, because what got you here is never going to get you there. So I think that that's something that really HR folks need to sort of figure out in their style of working.
Definitely a very interesting point of view. I think we have enough time to have one question from the audience. We've just got enough time for that. Someone, the lady in the back. Okay, so we'll take two questions then.
You didn't mean me, isn't it? Okay. So, hi, I'm Venkat from Tesco. Nice perspectives and great questions. I just want to know, as HR leaders, how do you strike a balance between the human touch and the digital touch? Because while we are doing a lot of digital stuff on data and probably now it's easier for an analytics guy to become a HR. Is that right? Maybe not. But how do you strike the balance, and how do you still retain the human touch? Because you may go away looking at a lot of data, but you may probably get a totally different perspective if you talk to that person in person rather than collecting data from systems.
So I can give you an example actually, and we went through, the reason I want to cite an example is we went through this struggle some couple of years back, where we were trying to digitize everything and get into technology, especially because we have our own talent product. So being evangelists of the product, we want to use the product first and be out there. So the one thing where we really struggled and we didn't do well was potential candidates who we made offers to who were still yet to join the company. And in India, we have notice periods which range from 30 days to 90 days, and that's the time when candidates are out there in the market. And the usual digital stuff was in place where stuff would go to them, and through technology and all of that. And we realized that it's not helping because we're not seeing those people. So we completely changed that model, and we made the candidate. We introduced a new program called Candidate Connect, where the entire program is personal. So there's a complete human touch. There are 3 touch points. One is where after the offer is made, the candidate is actually invited into the company for an event. So he or she gets to meet with a lot of people and see the culture of the company. The second touch point is where he or she is invited into like a coffee session with not his or her own group to which he's been hired, but peer group, so other people, where he gets to see the leadership in the company, because everybody that he's going to work with, he's been interviewed by, so we don't want him to meet them. So leadership of the company, where they spend like a good hour just talking about where he's at. And a third point, when he's really ready to come into like probably a couple of weeks away, where he comes in and we give him like a kit of branded, Saba branded goodies. So that's really the time where we found, very interestingly, so the emotions part, right? If somebody is not going to join us because they've got another offer, they refuse to accept the gift. Because there's some human, feeling in you which says, okay, I'm going to accept this, and in 2 weeks I'm not joining them. It doesn't look right, So we had a few instances where they said, it's okay, I'm not. But it worked so well, and our offer to joining ratio really increased after this personal connect program. So I think it's very important to have a balance in whatever technology that we are trying to use, but the personal touch, I think in some things can never go away.
And I think it's important also for you to stratify any of the offerings, right? I would imagine as digital natives come into the workforce, they wouldn't care for personalization. Like my daughter doesn't care to go out and play. When we were kids, we wanted to go have that touch and feel. Digital immigrants will still have those, right? So we have to be tuned to reality to say that now in the current workforce, like she said, maybe that personal touch may be needed, but I don't see, fast forward that your kids, your digital natives, as I no longer call millennials, when they come into the workforce, their need for those personalization will completely go away. With all due respect, I think we have to open up to that reality.
My point of view is that the fact that though we have chatbots, the fact that we give them a name shows the degree of personalization, right? So there's this human thing in us that we want to be able to go back and connect with one individual. The question that becomes is, to what extent can you get AI or machine learning to work for you? How do you take that data and then connect with individuals who would need it? Or going back to Maitreyee's points, where it works or where it doesn't work. I think it's about experimenting along the way. There is no tested mechanism that is going to solve it for all. It's going to be what works with that particular client group of yours. And when I say client, I mean, is it for recruitment? Is it for engagement? What is it for?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Made me think. Is the fact that everything that can be learned probably could get digitized. But I still think that maybe it will take a long time before judgment, influence, intuition, etc. can get learned. I'm sure probably this is what the second half of the chess box, as in the book, The Second Machine Age, talks about, which probably could happen, but it's tougher. So the role of HR is also sometimes playing in this space and helping the organization make transformations. So this data which comes in is probably more of the insight, and that probably can help HR in this space of influence, judgment, and taking the organization forward. That's where I would see it. Very good question, indeed.
So, in the interest of time, we'll have to park this discussion for now. It's been a pleasure having you as part of this panel. I'd like to thank you all for sharing insights with the rest of the room. It's been a very pleasant discussion. I hope all of you have been you've gotten whatever you came here for.